The wind carried the scent of pine and smoke across the clearing, mingling with the rhythmic thud of boots against damp earth. The warriors of the Silver Fang pack were training under the dull morning sky, a sea of motion, strength, and discipline. Every growl, every clash of fists echoed power and control. Watching from the edge of the grounds, Lira wrapped her arms around herself, as though trying to make her smallness invisible among giants. Her heart raced as her gaze found him, Alpha Ryden. Tall, sharp, unforgiving, his very presence bent the air around him. Dark hair clung to his temples as he sparred bare-chested, muscles tensing under scars that whispered of wars long past. His amber eyes, even from a distance, held the weight of command. The pack moved when he moved. They breathed when he breathed, and she, a low-born Omega, barely acknowledged by most, couldn't look away. She told herself she wasn't staring out of admiration. No, it was fear. Fear of the man who ruled. Not just the territory, but the hearts and futures of every wolf within it. Fear of the Alpha who had the power to decide her fate. Lyra's life had always been small. Silent mornings spent tending to the kitchens. Endless days of scrubbing stone floors until her hands bled. Omegas weren't meant to be seen. They were meant to serve. But lately, whispers had begun circling through the servants' halls. Whispers that the Alpha was looking for a mate, a chosen one. And when the announcement came that he would be selecting his Luna at the next moonrise, the entire pack erupted. In speculation, daughters of betas, of warriors, even neighboring alphas sent their kin to the Silver Fang lands. Each of them beautiful, strong, and worthy, but no one imagined it would be her. That night, the pack gathered in the grand hall. Torches burned bright against carved wooden walls, the air thick with perfume and tension. Ryden stood at the head of the dais, his expression unreadable. The room quieted with a single lift of his hand. "I have made my choice," he said, voice deep and smooth like thunder rolling over stone. "The moon has guided me." Dozens of she-wolves straightened, eyes gleaming with hope and ambition. Lira, who had been standing among the servers at the edge of the hall, dared not even breathe. Then his gaze found hers. Lira. The room froze. She blinked, sure she had misheard him. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Disbelief, outrage, envy. "The Omega?" Someone whispered. "No, it can't be." But Ryden's voice silenced them all. "Step forward." Her legs trembled as she obeyed, her mind screaming that this was wrong, impossible. Alphas did not choose Omegas. They took them, used them, discarded them. They did not crown them Luna. When she reached him, her knees nearly buckled under the intensity of his stare. Those amber eyes, cold and searching, studied her like a puzzle he alone could solve. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You will," Ryden said simply and turned to the pack. "She is under my protection now. Any who question her place, question me." A growl rippled through the room, but no one spoke. No one dared. That night, Lyra's life changed forever. The following days blurred in a haze of disbelief. The servants avoided her eyes. Warriors bowed stiffly as she passed, their respect edged with resentment. Even the elders whispered when her name was mentioned. Lira spent her hours alone in the Luna's quarters, vast, silent rooms filled with cold luxuries she did not know how to touch. She couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floors, every howl beyond the walls, reminded her that she was out of place here. She had been chosen, yes, but chosen for what? Love? Power? Or something else entirely? The door creaked open one evening, and she turned sharply. Ryden stood in the doorway. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. His presence filled every inch of the room before he even stepped inside. The faint scent of cedar and rain clung to him as he approached, his movements controlled, deliberate. "Do you know why I chose you?" he asked quietly. Lira shook her head, her fingers clutching the fabric of her dress. "No, Alpha. Look at me." Her breath hitched. Slowly, she raised her gaze to meet his. The air between them felt charged, heavy with something neither of them could name. "I didn't choose you because of what you are," he said. "I chose you because of what you are not." She frowned, unsure. "I don't understand." He stepped closer until his shadow fell over her. "You don't crave power. You don't wear masks. And in a world built on lies and ambition, that makes you dangerous." Her heart pounded. "Dangerous?" "To me," he said softly. For the first time, she saw it. A flicker of something raw behind his amber eyes. Not dominance. Not fury. But weariness. As if he carried too much of the world and had forgotten how to put it down. She didn't speak. Neither did he doubt then. Without warning, he reached out, not to claim, not to command, but to brush a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was brief, almost reverent, but it sent a tremor through her chest. "Rest," he murmured. "Tomorrow, everything changes." And then he was gone. That night, Lira lay awake under the pale glow of the moon spilling through her window. Her thoughts were a storm, fear, confusion, and something else that frightened her even more than the Alpha himself. Curiosity. Why her? What did he see? And what did tomorrow hold that could change everything again? Outside in the courtyard. Below, Ryden stood alone beneath the same moonlight, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. The prophecy of the Luna's mark echoed in his mind. The one who bears no power will bring balance to the one who carries too much thought, and for the first time in years, the Alpha of the Silver Fang pack felt uncertain not of his enemies, not of his strength, but of the girl sleeping under his roof, the girl fate had chosen to be his undoing. Morning broke cold and silver. Mist clung to the trees beyond the compound, curling like ghostly fingers over the stone walls. Lira stood before the mirror, trying to quiet her heartbeat. The reflection that stared back at her was both familiar and foreign, the same wide eyes, the same trembling hands, yet everything else had changed. The simple linens of an Omega had been replaced by a Luna's gown, stitched with threads of gold and crimson. It felt heavy on her shoulders, like the weight of a crown she hadn't earned. The knock on the door came sharp and deliberate. "Enter," she managed to say, though her voice barely carried. A guard stepped in, bowing slightly. "Alpha Ryden requests your presence in the council hall." Her stomach dropped. "Now, yes, Luna." The title sounded wrong. It scraped against the edges of her reality. Still, she followed. The walk through the corridors felt endless. Every warrior, every servant, every elder she passed turned to look, not with warmth, not with pride, but with judgment barely masked behind bowed heads. She heard their whispers trail after her like smoke. She doesn't belong here. An Omega chosen by the moon? Impossible. It's a test. The Alpha must have his reasons. Her steps faltered only once when she saw the door to the training yard, the same one where she had spent years, scrubbing blood and dirt from the stones after every battle. The smell of iron and sweat still haunted the air. Only now, the scent of her fear overpowered them all. When she entered the council hall, silence rippled across the room. The elders sat at the long table, faces carved from stone, eyes as sharp as daggers. At the far end stood Ryden, tall and composed, his hands resting behind his back. His expression betrayed nothing. "Come forward," he said. Lira obeyed. The marble floor was cold beneath her bare feet, grounding her in a way her thoughts could not. "You've all heard the moon's choice," Ryden addressed the room. "You've all doubted it," a murmur spread among the council. Elder Thorn, his hair white as snow and voice like gravel, leaned forward. "With respect, Alpha, tradition cannot be ignored. The Luna must be equal in rank, a balance of power and strength." "And yet," Ryden replied, The moon does not concern itself with rank. The elder's eyes narrowed. Then how do we know this isn't a mistake? Ryden's gaze flicked to Lira. We test it. Her heart stuttered. Test me? He nodded once. Every Luna must prove herself worthy of the bond, to the pack, to the ancestors, and to me. The words cut deeper than any blade. Around her, the elders exchanged approving glances. It was the excuse they'd been waiting for. Elder Thorn's lips curled into a thin smile. Then let the trials begin. The first trial came at dusk. The pack gathered in the courtyard, torches flickering like restless hearts. Lira stood at the center, facing 3 warrior women, seasoned fighters with muscles like sculpted stone and eyes that gleamed with challenge. They bowed to the alpha, then turned toward her with predatory smiles. Ryden's voice carried through the air. You will not harm her beyond reason, but she must learn that being Luna means standing her ground. Lyra's throat went dry. I'm not a fighter, she whispered. You're a wolf, Ryden said, his tone softer now, but unrelenting. Remember that. The signal came. The first warrior lunged. Instinct screamed louder than thought. Lira ducked, barely avoiding the strike. The crowd hissed, jeered. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding against her ribs. The second came from the side, her movement fluid and merciless. Lira hit the ground hard, palms scraping against the dirt. Get up. Someone shouted. Show her what happens when the moon makes a mistake. The laughter stung worse than the bruises, but then, amidst the chaos, her wolf stirred, the part of her she had spent her life suppressing. It rose, trembling but defiant, whispering through the bond that linked her to something greater. Not prey. Not today. When the third warrior charged, Lira shifted her stance, catching the woman's arm and twisting on instinct. The warrior yelped in pain as she hit the ground, the crowd gasping. Lyra's chest heaved, her hands trembling from shock and adrenaline. For a heartbeat, silence filled the courtyard. Then Ryden spoke, voice calm but carrying pride like thunder. She learns fast. The crowd lowered their heads, muttering. The first test had ended, not in victory, but not in humiliation either. For the first time, Lyra had stood without breaking. That night, the pain in her muscles was sharp, but the ache in her chest was sharper. She stood by the window, staring at the moon that hung low and heavy, her reflection faint in the glass. Behind her, the door opened. I told you to rest, Ryden said quietly. She didn't turn. Is this your way of protection? Throwing me to wolves stronger than me? They needed to see, he said. See me fail. See you fight. She turned then, anger flaring through her exhaustion. You think this is about proving something to them? You think I care what they whisper? I'm not meant to be here, Alpha. You know it. Ryden stepped closer, his expression unreadable. I do. The honesty in his voice disarmed her. Then why? She asked, voice trembling. Why choose me? His gaze softened, the faintest crack in his unyielding armor. Because when the world bows in fear, you stand in truth. You looked at me that night in the hall, and you didn't see an alpha. You saw a man. And I needed someone who could remind me of that. The words hit harder than she expected. The air between them shifted, heavy, uncertain, alive. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Not to me. Why? His voice was low, dangerous, because they might be true. Lyra's breath caught. For a long moment, neither spoke. The night outside was endless, filled with wind and the distant howls of wolves who would kill for his approval. Yet here they were, 2 souls bound by fate neither of them fully trusted. Finally, Ryden stepped back, his control slipping back into place like armor. Tomorrow, the second trial begins. You'll need rest. Another fight? She asked bitterly, his lips curved faintly. Not all battles are fought with claws. He left before she could ask what that meant. That night, when sleep finally came, Lira dreamed of a field under a blood-red moon. She saw herself standing alone, surrounded by shadows that were familiar faces, the pack, the elders, even Ryden. They whispered her name, not in anger, but in reverence. And from the darkness, a voice she didn't recognize spoke. The Luna is not chosen to serve the Alpha. She is chosen to change him. She woke with tears in her eyes and a certainty she couldn't explain. Whatever tomorrow's trial held, it would test more than her strength. It would test her heart. The next morning dawned too still, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. The air smelled of pine and steel, sharp, clean, and dangerous. Lira woke to the sound of bells ringing in the distance, summoning the pack to the temple grounds. She dressed in silence, her body sore but her spirit restless. The dress laid out for her was different this time. No silk, no jewels. Just a simple gray tunic, the fabric plain and rough. It suited her more than anything else she'd worn since coming here. When she stepped outside, 2 guards were already waiting. "Alpha Ryden requests your presence," one said. No motion, no tone. Just duty. They led her through the narrow forest path that wound behind the mansion, where ancient stones marked the way to the Moon Temple, a sacred place rarely used except for the most binding of rituals. Moss crept between the carvings, and the air grew colder with each step dot at the temple gates. Ryden stood alone. He wasn't dressed as a ruler today. No leather armor, no weapons. Only a dark cloak that rippled in the morning wind. His storm gray eyes found hers the moment she appeared. "You came," he said softly. "As if I had a choice," she replied. "Everyone has a choice," he said, then turned and walked into the temple. "Even you." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning sage and something older, ancient energy that made the hairs on her arms rise. Candles flickered along the altar, their flames bowing toward the statue of the moon goddess, carved from silver stone and draped in shadows. "This is the trial of truth," Ryden said, standing before the statue. "The moon does not only choose power, she chooses those who can see through lies, even when the lie is their own." Lira frowned. "What does that mean?" "You'll find out soon enough." Elder Thorn entered then, accompanied by 2 seers, women cloaked in white with eyes like glass. They carried a bowl carved from bone, smoke curling from within. The scent was intoxicating, sweet and dark all at once. She must walk through the memory. One of the seers said, her voice echoing like wind over water. Only then can she face the truth. Before Lira could speak, Ryden reached for her hand. His touch was warm, grounding, solid. "Whatever you see," he said quietly, "remember it isn't the past punishing you. It's the moon showing you who you are." Then the smoke thickened, and the world dissolved. She was back in the village, her old home, the small cottage by the river. The sound of her mother humming as she ground herbs, the faint cry of a wolf in the woods. Everything looked exactly as it had the day she was taken. But something was wrong. The air shimmered like heat on glass. The colors felt too sharp dot. Then she saw him, her father. He sat by the fire, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped. The smell of whiskey and regret filled the room. She remembered this day, the argument that had sent her running into the forest, the night the hunters came, the night she lost everything. But this time, as she stepped closer, she heard something new. "You were never meant to be mine," her father said, his voice shaking. "The goddess took mercy on me. You were left at my door, a child of prophecy, cursed and blessed all at once." Lira froze. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer. His body flickered, the illusion breaking apart like smoke in the wind. The fire went out, and a new scene bled in. The temple, long ago, and a woman standing before the altar, holding a baby with eyes like molten silver. "Moon's child," a priestess whispered. "Born to unite Alpha and Omega, or to destroy them both?" Lyra staggered back, gasping, No, no, that can't be me. But deep inside, her wolf stirred, not in denial, but recognition. The vision shifted again. She saw Ryden, younger, bloodied, standing in a field of bodies. His eyes were the same, though colder, harder. A voice echoed through the memory, the same seer's voice from before. Your fate is bound to hers. Alpha, her blood will either save your kind or end it. He had turned away then, jaw clenched, refusing to listen. Now, in the vision, he looked up and met her gaze through time. The world cracked apart like glass. Lira gasped as the smoke vanished, stumbling forward into the cold stone of the temple. Her lungs burned. Her knees hit the floor. She barely registered Ryden's arms catching her before she fell. What did you see? He asked, his voice rough. She stared at him, shaking. You knew. Ryden's expression tightened. What did I know? That I'm not who I thought I was. I wasn't born a pack Omega. Her voice broke. A prophecy. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush her. Ryden's hand dropped from her shoulder. I suspected, he said finally. But the goddess reveals what she will when she chooses. You weren't ready before. Lyra's chest ached. Ready for what? To be a weapon? To be your fate? His jaw clenched, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. To choose? Choose? She whispered. You talk about choice like I've ever had one. You dragged me here, forced me into your trials, called me yours. He stepped closer, his voice rising, sharp as a blade. Because if I hadn't, they would have killed you. The words cut the air in two. She stared at him, stunned. Ryden's voice dropped, low and ragged. The elders knew a prophecy child was among the Omegas. They wanted to find her, to control her, to use her blood to break the bond of the moon. I brought you here to keep you alive. Lira, the anger in her chest crumbled into confusion, fear, and something deeper she couldn't name. Then why not tell me? She whispered. He looked away. Because the moment you knew, the moon would start her work. And once that happens, there's no stopping what comes next. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The first storm of the season gathered on the horizon, heavy and wild. The temple lights flickered. Lira took a step back. What happens next? Ryden met her gaze, storm-gray eyes burning with both defiance and dread. The third trial, the one neither of us can escape. She swallowed. And what is it? His voice was almost a whisper. Love. The storm didn't wait for dawn. It broke over the mountains like a living thing, thunder rolling across the sky, rain slashing through the forest, wind howling against the temple walls. Inside, the candles flickered wildly, their flames bending under invisible pressure. Lyra stood at the center of the stone chamber, soaked to the bone, her heart pounding louder than the rain outside. Ryden faced her across the altar, his cloak discarded, his expression carved from ice and anguish. This trial, he said quietly, was not meant to come so soon. She swallowed hard. Then stop it. I can't. His voice broke for the first time. Once the moon calls for it, there's no undoing it. He turned toward the altar, where the seers waited, their white robes now streaked with water and ash. Between them burned a silver flame that refused to die despite the storm's fury. Elder Thorn stepped forward, his face grave. The third trial, he intoned, is the trial of the bond. The prophecy child must face the truth of her heart, and the alpha bound to her must choose whether love is his strength or his destruction. The words fell like stones in water, heavy and final. Lyra's chest tightened. And if we fail? The elder didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. The ritual began. The silver flame grew brighter, its light spilling across the floor like liquid moonlight. Symbols etched into the stone began to glow, forming a circle around them. The temperature dropped. Even the storm seemed to pause, holding its breath. Step into the circle. The seer whispered. Lira hesitated, then moved forward. Ryden followed, their steps echoing in unison. The moment their feet touched the glowing sigils, the air shifted, heavy, charged. She felt the pull immediately, a heat deep in her chest that wasn't her own heartbeat. It was his. The bond. It pulsed between them, invisible yet tangible, like a current of electricity beneath their skin. Her wolf stirred, restless and frightened, while his aura pressed close, powerful, suffocating, familiar. "This is the moon's truth," the seer said. "No lies can stand inside the circle. No hearts can hide." Ryden met her eyes. "Then we have no choice but to speak it." The flame surged. They were no longer in the temple. The world around them dissolved, replaced by endless white, a realm between thought and memory. Here, only truth could exist. No guards, no elders, no duty. Just them. Lyra's breath caught. "Where are we?" "The moon's domain," Ryden said softly. "She see what's buried in our hearts." She turned away from him, her voice trembling. "Then she'll see everything I never wanted you to know." "I already know it," he said. "You hate me?" She spun to face him, eyes blazing. "I did. I do. Because you took my freedom. I saved your life." "You caged it." His jaw clenched. "Would you rather be dead?" "Yes." She shouted, but her voice cracked. "Because at least death would have been mine to choose." The silence that followed was brutal. The light around them dimmed, flickering with their rage. Ryden's chest rose and fell, his voice low and raw. "Do you think I wanted this? To bind my fate to someone who despises me? You were the one thing I wasn't supposed to care about. And yet, every time you looked at me," he broke off, his hands shaking. "I couldn't breathe." Lyra's throat tightened. "Then why hurt me?" "Because I didn't know how else to keep you safe." The light surged again, and the space between them pulsed with their conflicting truths. She could feel his heartbeat pounding against hers, fast and unsteady. Her anger faltered, not gone, but melting into something more dangerous. The bond pulled stronger. Memories flooded around them, not visions, but emotions. Every look, every fight, every moment they'd shared since that night in the rain. His fury when she defied him, his silence when she cried, his hand catching hers when she fell, the small, impossible tenderness that had existed in every cruel act. Lira stumbled backward. "No, stop this." "You can't stop truth," Ryden said, stepping closer. "You can only face it." The world burned silver. She saw herself, through his eyes, standing in the courtyard that first night, drenched, trembling, defiant, her eyes full of fire instead of fear. He had watched her and felt something he hadn't felt in years, something dangerous. Not pity, not dominance. Hope. The image shattered, leaving them breathless, standing in the white nothingness again. Lira pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "You saw me as the reason I still fight," Ryden said, voice hoarse. "As the only thing that reminds me I'm still human." The air grew heavy with the weight of the unspoken. The bond between them pulsed once more, a heartbeat shared. The seer's voice echoed from the void. To complete the trial, the bond must be accepted or broken. Ryden's gaze locked on hers. "If we accept it, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me for life, body, soul, and fate. And if we don't, then one of us dies." Her breath caught. What? He didn't repeat it. He didn't have to. The choice was carved into the space between them, love or death, bond or freedom, fate or defiance. Lyra's vision blurred with tears. "I never asked for this." "I know," Ryden whispered. "Neither did I." The light dimmed. The bond trembled. And somewhere deep inside her chest, something began to break, not from pain, but from recognition. She had spent so long fighting him, hating him, denying what burned beneath their every argument. But now, stripped bare before the moon, there was nowhere left to hide. Lira took a step forward. Ryden's breath hitched. "What are you doing?" She looked up, her voice shaking but sure. "Facing the truth." Her hand reached for his, and when their fingers touched, the bond ignited. Silver light exploded around them, flooding the void. The power of the moon roared through their veins, burning, binding, consuming. Every scar, every wound, every word of hate turned to fire, to love, to something beyond either dot, and as the light faded, they fell, back into the temple, back into the world, collapsed in each other's arms. The storm outside had gone silent. Only their heartbeats remained. When Lira opened her eyes, the world was different. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was not peace. It was the breath held between two heartbeats. Moonlight poured through the shattered windows of the temple, painting everything in shades of silver and ash. The floor was littered with the remnants of candles, their wicks still glowing faintly. She lay against Ryden's chest, her pulse syncing with his. Every breath he took felt like it echoed through her bones. It was disorienting, terrifying, and beautiful at once. She shifted slightly, and his eyes opened. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two souls caught in the same rhythm, both knowing something irreversible had happened. "It's done," Ryden murmured, voice roughened by exhaustion. "The moon has chosen." Lira pushed herself up slowly, her body trembling. What did she choose? He sat up beside her, the faintest flicker of emotion crossing his face. "You, us. The bond is complete." Her breath hitched. "Then why do you look like you've lost something?" He didn't answer at first. His hand went to his chest, to the place where his heart should have been racing, and she felt it. The same pain, the same pull, as if his heartbeat had become hers. "The bond is perfect," he said quietly. "Too perfect. I can feel your heart in mine, and I can feel yours," she whispered, pressing her palm to her chest. It's like we're one." He nodded, eyes heavy with something deeper than fear. "That's exactly what it means." The temple doors burst open. Guards flooded in, followed by Elder Thorn and the seers. They froze at the sight before them, the Alpha and the Omega intertwined in the center of the sacred circle, the silver sigils still glowing faintly beneath them. "The prophecy," one of the seers whispered. "It's fulfilled." Thorn stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Do you realize what you've done, Ryden?" "I did what the moon demanded," Ryden replied. "The trials are over?" "No," Thorn said sharply. "They've only just begun. You've bonded the prophecy child, and now the balance has shifted." Lira looked between them, confused. "What does that mean?" The elder's gaze was grim. "It means the moon has bound your lives together. If one of you dies, so does the other." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Lira stared at Ryden, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Tell me that's not true." Ryden's silence was answer enough. Her voice cracked. "You knew." He met her eyes, his storm gray gaze filled with regret. "I suspected." "You suspected and still..." She stopped herself, shaking. "Why? Because I couldn't lose you again," he said softly. "Not after everything the prophecy showed me." Her tears burned hot. "You've taken my freedom twice now, once with your chains, and now with your heart." Ryden stepped closer, but she backed away, her hands trembling. The silver mark of the bond still glowed faintly against her wrist, pulsing in time with his. "You think I wanted this?" he said, his voice breaking. "You think I wanted to be tied to someone I could destroy with a single mistake?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, because deep down, beneath the anger, a part of her already understood. The bond was not his choice or hers. It was fate's cruel mercy. Elder Thorn spoke again. You've set forces in motion that neither of you can control. The bond will make you stronger, but it will also make you vulnerable. If one is hurt, the other will feel it. If one dies, the other follows. The words hung in midair like a curse. Ryden's hand went to her shoulder. Then we'll protect each other. Thorn shook his head. You can't protect what destiny intends to test. That night, the mansion felt different, alive in a way it never had before. Every torch flickered brighter, every shadow seemed to whisper. The pack could sense it. They bowed lower when Ryden passed, their eyes darting toward Lira with awe and fear. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was the Omega bound to their Alpha, the heart of the prophecy that had haunted their bloodline for generations, and it terrified them in the quiet of Ryden's chambers. The weight of it pressed down on both of them. He stood by the window, shirtless, his tattoos catching the moonlight, symbols of power and burden inked across skin that bore too many scars. Lira sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. Neither spoke. Finally, she said, "When I was a child, I used to dream of freedom, of walking under the open sky without anyone telling me who I was supposed to be. Now I'm bound to the one person I swore I'd never forgive." He turned, his expression unreadable. "And I'm bound to the one person who made me believe I still had a soul." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, neither Alpha nor Omega existed. Only two broken beings caught in the gravity of something neither of them had asked for. "I don't know how to be this," she whispered. He took a step closer. "Then we'll learn together." His words were quiet, but they carried weight, a promise and a curse all at once. She looked down, tracing the faint glow of the bond mark on her wrist. "What if it kills us?" "Then we'll die on our own terms," he said simply. For the first time since the temple, she almost believed him. Outside, the forest moved restlessly under the moonlight. Wolves howled in the distance, low, mournful, as if mourning something not yet lost. The prophecy's energy rippled through the pack, binding their fates tighter to the pair who now carried both salvation and ruin in their blood dot. In the silence that followed, Lira closed her eyes and whispered, "Whatever comes next, I won't run." Ryden's gaze softened, and his hand brushed her cheek, not as a command, but as a vow. "Then neither will I." The bond between them pulsed once, faint but steady, the rhythm of two hearts that had become one. And somewhere in the cold expanse of the night sky, the moon watched. Silent, knowing, waiting, because fate was not done with them yet. And love, in its cruelest form, had only just begun. Days passed, but peace did not return. The bond between Ryden and Lira was both a blessing and a wound, binding them closer with every heartbeat, yet tearing at the fragile balance that held the pack together. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some called Lira the moon's chosen. Others called her the curse. And behind closed doors, the elders whispered the same question: how long before the prophecy claims its price? It began with the blood on the northern border. Ryden and his men had gone to inspect a series of rogue attacks, lone wolves who had been slaughtered in the night, their hearts missing, their eyes burned black. When he returned, his face was grave, his storm gray eyes shadowed by something that looked like fear. "They were ours," he said, pacing across the council chamber. "Marked wolves. But something ripped their bonds out?" Elder Thorn frowned. "That's impossible. A bond cannot be severed unless the moon herself allows it." Ryden finished. The elder's silence confirmed what both of them already knew. Something unnatural was moving through the land. Something that had begun the night the prophecy bond was sealed. Lira listened from the doorway, her fingers trembling against the stone frame. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the air was thick with danger, and her instincts had been sharper since the bond. When Ryden turned, his eyes met hers immediately. The bond pulsed between them, pulling her into the room. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. She stepped forward anyway. "You think this is about me?" "I know it's about you," he said, too quickly. "Every prophecy leaves a trail, and whatever this thing is, it's following your scent." Her chest tightened. "Then let me face it." "No," he snapped. His voice soft immediately after, guilt flickering across his face. "No, if you die too," she finished for him, her voice trembling. "You think I don't know that?" Ryden's hands clenched. "That's exactly why I can't risk you." "Maybe that's why you should," she said quietly. "If this prophecy started with me, then maybe it ends with me too." Elder Thorne's voice cut through the tension. "There may be another way." Both of them turned. The elder stepped closer, his cane tapping against the floor. "The blood oath. A ritual of division. It could separate the moon's bond, weaken its control over you both." Ryden's expression hardened. "At what cost?" "Blood," Thorne said simply. "Yours and hers." Lyra's breath hitched. "You mean one of us could die?" Thorne didn't deny it. "The bond is strong. It was forged by divine power. To break it would be to defy the goddess herself." Ryden turned away, his jaw tightening. "Then we don't break it." "Ryden," Lyra began, but he cut her off. "No, I won't lose you. Not to prophecy. Not to the moon. Not to anyone." His voice cracked like thunder, and for a moment, she saw it, the fear behind his power, the man behind the alpha. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of love, afraid of her Dot, and she didn't know which was worse. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Lira lay in the dark, listening to the storm outside. She could feel Ryden's heartbeat even from across the room, slow, heavy, familiar. Every time it skipped, her chest ached. Every time he sighed, she felt it in her bones. Dot, she couldn't live like this. Bound by fate. Chained to love. Waiting for prophecy to decide when she could breathe. When she finally rose, the moon was high, her silver light spilling through the window like liquid glass. Lyra slipped out of bed, barefoot and silent. The corridors were empty, save for the soft echo of her steps. The temple called to her Dot. By the time she reached it, the storm had faded. The world was still again, too still. The sigils from the trial still glowed faintly on the floor, pulsing with power. She knelt beside them, tracing her fingers over the stone. "I never asked for this," she whispered. "Not your bond, not your prophecy. I just wanted a life." Her voice trembled. "If you can hear me, goddess, tell me how to undo this." But the moon didn't answer. Only silence pressed down. Then, a voice, soft and unfamiliar, came from behind her. "You can't undo what was meant to be." Lyra spun, her heart leaping, but it wasn't Ryden. It was a woman cloaked in white, her face hidden by a veil. Her scent was unfamiliar and yet ancient. "Who are you?" Lyra asked. The woman smiled faintly. "I am what remains of her light, the moon's messenger." Lyra's throat went dry. "Then tell me, what do you want from me?" "What the moon always wants," the woman said. "Balance. Blood for peace. Love for war. I don't understand." "You will," the messenger said softly, stepping closer. "When the blood moon rises, your bond will be tested. One of you must fall so the other may rise." Lyra's chest constricted. "No, there has to be another way." The messenger tilted her head. "The moon does not deal in choices, child. Only in truth. And the truth is written in blood." Before Lyra could speak, the messenger's form dissolved into silver mist, and the temple went cold. Dot, the next morning, Ryden found her standing at the window, pale and silent. "What happened?" he asked Dot. She turned slowly, her eyes distant. "The moon spoke to me." His expression darkened. "What did she say?" Lira swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. She said that one of us has to die. Ryden froze. The air between them thickened until it was hard to breathe. He stepped forward, his voice hoarse. Then she'll have to take me first. Lira shook her head, tears burning her eyes. That's not how this works. Then we'll make it work, he said, gripping her shoulders. We'll defy her. She met his gaze, her voice trembling. You can't defy the moon, Ryden. He pulled her closer, his storm gray eyes burning with both fury and devotion. Then I'll die trying. The bond between them pulsed, sharp, painful, alive. Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the moon began to bleed. The first omen came with the wind cold, bitter, carrying the scent of iron and rain. The kind of wind that made even the bravest wolves lift their heads and bare their teeth by dusk. The sky had turned crimson. The moon hung low and swollen, red as blood, heavy as judgment. The blood moon had risen, and the prophecy was waking. The pack gathered in the courtyard, their eyes reflecting the red light. Fear rippled through the air like a living thing. Every whispered breath seemed to echo with a question no one dared to speak aloud. Ryden stood at the steps, his black coat billowing behind him, storm-gray eyes scanning his wolves. He looked like a warlord carved from shadow. And yet, beneath that power, there was something fractured, a quiet dread buried under the steel. Lira stood beside him, her hands clasped tight, the faint glow of the bond shimmering beneath her skin. The mark on her collarbone, the one that had appeared after the moon's blessing, now burned brighter than ever, pulsing in rhythm with the crimson sky. Elder Thorn approached, his steps heavy. It has begun, he said quietly. The moon demands balance. Ryden's jaw tightened. Then she'll have to wait. Thorn's eyes flicked toward Lira. You cannot stop what's been written. Alpha, then I'll rewrite it, Ryden growled, but before anyone could answer, a scream shattered the night. The crowd parted as two wolves stumbled into view, both bleeding, their eyes black as tar. They weren't themselves. Their movements were wrong, twisted, as if their bones no longer obeyed, and when they looked up, Lira gasped. Their eyes were hollow, completely void of light. Possessed. Thorn stepped back, horror dawning in his gaze. The bond corruption has begun. What do you mean? Lira demanded. The prophecy warned of it, Thorn said. When the blood moon rises, the bond between life and death thins. Wolves tied to your alpha's line may lose their souls, consumed by the moon's shadow. Ryden's voice was low, dangerous. How do we stop it? Thorn's answer was a whisper. You can't, unless the bond between you two is severed before the moon reaches its peak. Lira turned pale. That's in less than an hour. Ryden drew his blade, silver catching the moonlight. Then we fight. The courtyard exploded into chaos. The possessed wolves lunged with unnatural strength, tearing through their own brothers. Blood splattered the stones, screams filling the night air. Ryden was everywhere at once, blade flashing, claws striking, fury unleashed. He moved like a tempest, each strike precise and brutal. Yet no matter how many fell, more rose, their eyes empty, their hearts hollow. Lira tried to help, her power flaring with the moon's energy, but every spell she cast only seemed to make them stronger. The bond between her and Ryden pulsed erratically, feeding off her fear and his rage, twisting them both into something dangerous. Finally, as another wave of corrupted wolves surged forward, Lira screamed, Ryden, stop. It's the bond. It's feeding them. He turned, panting, blood streaked across his jaw. What? She clutched her chest. They're not after the pack. They're after us. The bond is the source. It's drawing them in. Thorn's voice echoed through the storm. She's right. The moon wants a sacrifice. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Ryden met Lyra's eyes. realization cutting through him like a blade. Then, before she could move, he did the unthinkable. He raised his dagger and plunged it into his own arm. Slicing across the bond mark, pain ripped through both of them. Lira fell to her knees, screaming as the bond flared in violent light. Ryden, stop. She cried, crawling toward him. But he didn't. He gritted his teeth, forcing the blade deeper, blood dripping onto the stone. If this is what she wants, then she take it from me, not you. The ground shook. The blood moon flashed brighter, almost blinding. The possessed wolves froze mid-attack, their bodies trembling as if held by invisible strings. Then, slowly, they turned toward Lira. The moon had made her choice. Run. Ryden roared, grabbing her hand and pulling her through the chaos. They dashed through the halls of the mansion, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them, claws on marble, guttural growls rising closer. This won't stop. She shouted. The prophecy said one of us must fall. Then it'll be me. Ryden barked, slamming open the door to the ancient temple dot inside. The air shimmered with power. The moon's light poured through the shattered roof, bathing them in red. The sigils on the floor glowed again, the same that had once bound them together. Lira stumbled to the center, clutching her chest. The bond mark burned like fire, spreading veins of light up her neck. Ryden, she gasped. It's killing us both. He caught her before she fell, his hands trembling. No, not like this. Tears streamed down her face. You can't fight destiny. He cupped her face, his voice breaking. Then I'll change it. His hand reached into the wound on his arm, his blood mingling with hers as he pressed his palm to her chest. The bond flared violently, gold and red light twisting around them both, spitting faster. Wilder. The moon's voice thundered through the temple, cold, divine. Unyielding. One life, one love, one must end. Ryden's eyes locked with hers. Then let it be mine. No. Lira screamed, grabbing his wrist. We face it together. The light exploded dot outside, the wolves howled. The blood moon pulsed one final time, then faded, bleeding back into silver. When the storm cleared, only silence remained dot in the center of the temple. Two bodies lay entangled, Ryden and Lira, motionless. Their hands still clasped dot, but as the dawn broke, one of them stirred. A heartbeat. A breath. Lyra's eyes opened. Tears streaming as the rising sun kissed her face. She turned toward Ryden, lifeless, peaceful. His storm-gray eyes closed for the last time. Her scream echoed through the mountains. The morning after the blood moon was silent dot, no howls. No smoke. Only the quiet breathing of a world unsure if it had survived the night. The temple lay in ruins. Sunlight poured through broken stone and shattered sigils, washing the blood-stained floor in soft gold. The battle was over, or at least it seemed so dot, and in the center of it all, Lira knelt beside Ryden's body. His head rested in her lap, his black hair damp with dew. The wound over his heart had already stopped bleeding, sealed by the same magic that had once tied their souls. His storm-gray eyes would never open again, yet even in death, he looked like the alpha he was, fierce, unbending, eternal. Lyra's hands trembled as she brushed his cheek. The bond mark on her collarbone was gone, replaced by a faint scar, the moon's final gift. Or perhaps her curse. You said you'd change destiny, she whispered through her tears. And you did, just not the way I wanted. The wind stirred, gentle now, carrying the scent of ash and pine. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long, low, mournful. It wasn't a cry of defeat. It was a farewell. Lira rose slowly, her body weak, her heart shattered. Around her, the surviving wolves emerged from the shadows, their eyes clear once more, their minds freed from the moon's corruption. Elder Thorn was among them, limping, blood staining his robes. When he saw Ryden's body, he bowed his head. The Alpha's sacrifice restored the balance, he said quietly. The moon took what she was owed. Lyra's voice broke. Then she's cruel. Thorn's gaze softened. No, she demanded a soul strong enough to bear the burden of both love and leadership. Ryden gave her that. And in return, she gave us another sunrise. Lira looked toward the horizon. The sun was rising over the peaks, burning away the crimson night. The world was alive again because of him, but life without him felt like death. Days passed. Then weeks. The pack rebuilt slowly, mending walls, burying their dead, finding their rhythm in a world without the Alpha's voice. But wherever they looked, his presence lingered. His scent in the halls, his commands carved into their memory dot, and at the heart of it all stood Lira. The council offered her the title of Luna, a leader to guide them through peace. She refused at first. How could she lead when the man she loved had died for her? But then, one evening, as she walked the forest path that led to the ruins of the temple, a familiar wind brushed her hair, the same cold, wild wind that had always carried his scent, and she heard it. Faint, barely more than a whisper. You are not the end of me, Lira. She froze. Her heart stumbled in her chest. The air shimmered faintly with silver light, the mark of the bond, flickering like a heartbeat. She closed her eyes. Ryden? The moon doesn't take. She transforms. What we were isn't gone. It's eternal. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from knowing. Then stay with me, she whispered. Always. The wind faded, leaving her in silence, but the mark on her skin glowed once more, faint and steady, pulsing with life. Months later, under a sky clear and silver again, the pack gathered in the courtyard. Torches burned along the walls, and the air hummed with power, not the wild chaos of the blood moon, but the calm strength of renewal. Lira stepped forward, wearing black, not for mourning, but for legacy. Around her neck hung a pendant, carved from a shard of the moonstone that once powered the temple's seal. Within it, a spark of light glowed faintly, Ryden's essence, bound and eternal. Elder Thorn raised his voice to the pack. Tonight, we honor the Alpha who gave his life for our salvation, and we name his successor, Lira of the Moon Bloodline, keeper of his flame. The wolves howled in unison, the sound echoing across the mountains. For the first time since the war, it wasn't a cry of grief. It was a promise of unity, of strength, of remembrance. Lira raised her chin, her eyes shining. I am no replacement for Ryden, she said, her voice steady. But I carry his bond, his will, and his love. The moon demanded blood, we gave her loyalty, and she gave us freedom. From this night forward, the pack will rise not by fear, but by choice. The courtyard erupted in roars and howls of approval dot, and somewhere above, the moon broke through the clouds, no longer red, no longer cruel, but silver and pure. A single beam of light fell across Lyra's face, illuminating the mark on her skin. She smiled softly. I feel you, she whispered. And for a heartbeat, she could have sworn she felt a hand brush hers, warm, steady, eternal. That night, long after the fires died and the wolves slept, Lira stood alone at the edge of the forest. The wind whispered through the trees, and in the distance a wolf howled, deep and resonant, a call that stirred her soul. She tilted her head back toward the moon. Guard them, she murmured. Guard us, the wolf's call answered, and in the faint glow of silver light, the shape of a great black wolf stood among the trees, watching, waiting, protecting Ryden. The bond had not been broken. It had simply changed form. As dawn crept once more over the mountains, Lira whispered to the horizon, her heart no longer heavy but strong. We were never meant to end, she said. We were meant to begin again.